Welcome to the video today. We're going to be watching some reaction stuff. True crime, maybe not. Everything comes from the react suggestions of my Discord. So if you're not a part of my Discord yet, please join and put some videos in that you think might be interesting to watch. True crime or not. And if you haven't already known, we stream these. So if you're watching through the YouTube channel, you missed the stream, but you're welcome to follow the Twitch and maybe find the next react stream. I stream pretty much everything every day. I take like maybe a day off. I don't know. And if you're watching on stream right now, you should probably go sub to the YouTube channel. All right, let's do it. We're going to watch another video today from Brew, a channel we know, called The Day Police Bombed a Family Live on TV. Or on live TV, whatever, you know what I mean. I'm sure this will be the watch of all time.
On May 13th, 1985, the United States government bombed its own citizens on live TV, destroying 61 homes and killing American men, women, and children in the process.
Studied this in one of my classes.
That morning, 500 police officers had surrounded a single row house in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Its occupants were given 15 minutes to come outside and surrender. But when the 15 minutes had passed and no one had come out, the neighborhood became a battlefield. Explosives ripped.
I could be wrong. I could be thinking about something else. I'm pretty sure it's because they wanted to gentrify the neighborhood. I could be wrong.
Through walls, water cannons tore in through the freshly made holes, and police officers with shotguns, sniper rifles, M16s, and even submachine guns unleashed over 10,000 rounds on a family home that had children inside. And still, the people inside refused to come out. So, the government made a decision no American leadership had ever made before: to drop a bomb on a family home in the middle of a residential neighborhood. What was it about this house and the people living there that could possibly warrant the amount of force? They were a group of activists led by a man named Vincent Leaphart. Drafted into the Korean War, Vincent witnessed horrors that never left him. The destruction of innocent people, animals, and the land itself. By the time he returned home in 1954 with an honorable discharge, everything he had seen had deeply affected him. He began traveling, teaching himself global politics, and searching for a better way to live. He took in the ideas of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Gandhi, believing in fighting back against oppression rather than fleeing. He rejected organized religion outright, calling it a tool to keep people chained. In the late 1960s, Vincent returned to Philadelphia, but home wasn't what it should have been. The school system was broken, housing crumbled, black residents were denied jobs, gangs filled the void, and police brutality went unchecked. The man who oversaw it all was Philadelphia's mayor, Frank Rizzo. Before politics, he was a cop, and from his own words, you could tell what kind of cop he was. Break their heads. They try to break yours, you break theirs first. Rizzo rose through the ranks to become police commissioner in 1967, and his aggressive policing style was clear almost immediately. During a protest outside Girard College, a boarding school that admitted only poor, orphaned white boys, demonstrators gathered calling for equal access for black children. Deputy Commissioner Rizzo was there with hundreds of officers, holding the line. According to Kenneth Salam, also known as Freedom Smitty, who was there at the protest, the second week, Rizzo ordered the cops to get on their motorcycles and run into us and run us over. A lot of people were hit. People were injured. Then, in 1970, after a series of shootings targeting police officers, one of them fatal, Rizzo turned his attention to the local Black Panthers, a revolutionary black rights group. His raid left 6 suspects handcuffed, stripped naked, and lined against the wall. An image captured by news photographers burned this incident into the city's memory.
They were a little angry. They were humiliated. We took their pants off them to search them, you know. Only brave when they outnumber people.
Rizzo defended it all, pointing to the death of an officer for justification for the dehumanizing treatment. But later, the Panthers were proven innocent. A year later, in 1971, Rizzo ran for mayor, and he won. This was the Philadelphia that Vincent Leaphart returned to, a city of chaos, inequality, and police power, and he wanted to fight it. Not just for fellow African Americans, but for all life. He gave himself a new name, John Africa, after the continent where many paleoanthropologists believe all human life began. John Africa laid out a philosophy of life. At its core was one belief: the system, government, law, industry, was the root of all problems. His ideas were transcribed by social worker Donald Glassy, who was moved by his words. The result was the Guidelines, a manifesto focused on Black nationalism, animal rights, self-reliance, and back-to-nature lifestyle. It promoted scavenging, composting, raw food, exercise, and a rejection of the modern world. He then formed an organization to put his manifesto into action: MOVE. The word itself is not an acronym. Originally the Christian Movement for Life, it was quickly shortened to simply MOVE. At first, the group was made up mostly of John Africa's friends and family, but within a few years, it had grown to more than 50 members, and every one of them adopted the surname Africa. MOVE drew in people felt lost in modern society,
cool.
who felt beaten down by the systems meant to support them, and who were searching for a place where they belong. To them, John Africa's words offered a solution. Delbert Africa, a MOVE spokesman in the 70s, explains,
I never thought that revolution consisted of revolutionizing myself to get away from the things that caused me to want to revolt. Said it was only till I joined MOVE that I learned what true revolution was all about. Well, about hard work, about activity, about the absence of all those fashions and facades and labels.
The group rejected modern technology outright. John Africa's mother had died of pneumonia, and he blamed it on the air conditioner at the hotel where she worked, saying it disrupted her body chemistry. MOVE members were mostly young men and women, but children were part of the group as well, living under strict rules. They didn't go to school. They ate with their bare hands. Even something simple as combing their hair was not allowed. Combs were plastic, and plastic polluted the earth, so they let their hair grow naturally. Mike Africa Jr., John Africa's great-nephew, born into MOVE in the 1970s, remembered it vividly.
The children didn't wear clothes. You know, we were outside in the wintertime. I mean, I remember being a kid in the snow with no clothes. We swam at Cobbs Creek Park. We swam in the creek in February.
With their guidelines in place and a growing number of followers, MOVE needed a home where they could live together and support each other's alternative lifestyle. In 1974, MOVE settled into an old Victorian twin house at 309 North 33rd Street, later expanding into the adjoining house at 307. It became both their headquarters and their home. Members raised money by running a car wash out front, shoveling snow off the sidewalks, and helping neighbors with small repairs. The area was Powelton Village, a liberal countercultural neighborhood known for its diversity and tolerance. But even here, MOVE stood out. They lived strictly by the guidelines. That meant heating their house with wood fires. However, it also meant tossing garbage into the backyard as compost. The smell drew in rats and insects, but MOVE refused to exterminate them. For them, animal life was equal to human life, even if it was a cockroach. They also took in stray and injured dogs, dozens of them, until they formed a pack that roamed freely through the neighborhood. Through all of this, John Africa was rarely present. He was mostly in upstate New York, evading a federal warrant. And when he was in Philadelphia, he was often behind bars for contempt or disorderly conduct. He never stood at the front with a microphone or camera. That was left to his followers. And according to Delbert Africa, that was enough. His presence wasn't what mattered. His message was. And MOVE made sure that message was heard. They disrupted church services to share their beliefs. They shouted at patrons of pet shops, circuses, and zoos. Anywhere animals were confined, MOVE was there, loud, unrelenting, and often profane. With all of their loud disruption, it wasn't surprising that police began paying closer attention, and it was at the Philadelphia Zoo where their first confrontations with police began. MOVE members hurled insults at families on weekend visits to the zoo. Officers shouted back. From there, the protests only grew more heated. Bullhorns, streams of profanity, scuffles with police, arrests. Under Mayor Rizzo's rule, MOVE members took a lot of beatings, but they refused to budge. Because police violence in general was visibly pervasive throughout the city, many Philadelphians felt sympathy towards MOVE, but sympathy didn't always extend to their neighbors. Frustration in Powelton Village kept building. Residents reported being threatened by MOVE. Some alleged those threats were carried out. And the fear wasn't only face-to-face. Neighbors worried that if they spoke out publicly, they might end up singled out in On the Move, a column in the Philadelphia Tribune written by Louise Africa. Even the possibility of being criticized in print was enough to keep some people quiet. By 1976, one neighbor had had enough. They called the police, reporting a disturbance. The police response to this call was the spark, the inciting incident of escalating violence that would end in death, destruction, and hundreds of innocent lives shattered. According to MOVE members, the conflict with police began around 4 p.m. on Sunday, March 28, 1976. They were celebrating.
I could have sworn there was an element to like somebody big in the city wanting to create apartments in the area, motivating them as well. But I'm pretty sure this is what we talked about when I was in school. Maybe I'm crossing my wires. Not exactly a whole lot of cases where Americans were bombed by the government.
Celebrating the return of 7 of their members who had just been released after serving a month in jail on charges of contempt for disobedience and disrespect towards officers of the law.
When we got back, there was a big celebration, and not too long after that, we was moved on by a whole bunch of cops. Cops was swinging their nightsticks so hard on people that they broke them in half.
MOVE claimed they were viciously beaten without provocation. Police insisted it was the opposite, that a MOVE member struck first, and officers had no choice but to respond. Don Africa admitted hearing a fellow member of Chuck Africa shouting at officers before the violence began. "We're sick and tired of you people. Leave us alone." Whoever started it, what ensued was chaos. Janine Africa was among those outside to greet the returning members. She stood with her husband Phil and their baby boy Life in her arms. According to Janine, when the police moved to grab Phil, she stepped in front to shield him. "With no regard to me or my baby, they pushed me so hard that I fell. Cops stepped all over me and on me." The clash lasted about 20 minutes. When it was over, 6 MOVE members were rearrested, and in the basement of the MOVE house, fellow members claimed that Janine Africa was found clutching her infant, who was now deceased. Baby Life, she said, had been crushed by the weight of her own body when she was pushed. Authorities doubted her story. There were no hospital records or a birth certificate documenting the child's birth. If there was no paperwork proving the baby's existence, to the police, Life was a fabrication. But as per MOVE's aspirations of self-reliance and their distrust of the system, the group's children were not born in hospitals and they were never registered for a birth certificate. Despite the police department's claims that the baby never existed, MOVE members and neighbors insisted otherwise. "I saw that baby when it was first born. I knew when Janine was pregnant.
They just said the baby didn't exist.
I saw the police beating the rest of them like dogs."
So they said that the police killed a baby, and then the police said, "Nuh-uh, prove it." I really can't say I'm shocked.
"It's terrible. They shouldn't have treated them like that," said Cecil Wallace, who lived next door. Even if the state refused to recognize the child's death, MOVE had another plan. James Link, a young late-shift reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, had been covering MOVE protests and knew several members. One night in 1976, Delbert Africa called him, inviting him to observe what he described as an off-the-record meeting with city officials. James arrived at the house with 3 officials. In the basement, a picnic table was set with food. As they ate, Delbert tapped James on the shoulder and led him to a dark room. Inside was the body of a baby, the umbilical cord still attached. It looked as if it had been buried, then exhumed. Delbert said this was baby Life. They hoped the officials in attendance would finally help them file murder charges. When James's camera flash lit up the room, the officials were stunned at the sight of the corpse. The story made the paper, but when police demanded they'd be given the body, MOVE refused, saying they didn't trust the medical examiner's office. In the end, no police investigation into the alleged murder of baby Life was conducted, and no charges were ever filed. And while the truth remained tangled in distrust, one thing was clear.
Tomorrow?
This tragedy only accelerated the conflict between MOVE and the police. By 1977, Mayor Frank Rizzo had labeled MOVE a terrorist organization, and he was determined to drive them out of Powelton Village. But as much as Rizzo hated MOVE, the feeling was mutual. 3 members were sentenced to 3 years in prison after the violent clash with police in '76. Move responded with a bullhorn set up in front of their home and yelled into it day and night, demanding the release of what they called their political prisoners. Neighbors who had once complained about garbage and stray dogs now had something louder to contend with. In early 1977, negotiations began between Move and neighbors, but things escalated on May 20th when city health inspectors attempting to enter their house were met on the porch by Move members in jumpsuits and green berets, armed with rifles. As a result, the police were called and the siege began. Rizzo ordered a massive presence. Police surrounding the house and Move members were threatened with arrest if they dared step outside. Most charges centered on firearm violations and incitement to riot. This deepened divisions in Powelton Village. Neighbors who were once united in a shared frustration over Move were now split over police tactics, with many opposing Rizzo's heavy-handed approach. Meanwhile, the more Move upset the police and unsettled the neighborhood, the more attention they drew to their cause. Outsiders were called in to mediate between Move and the city. Out of those talks came a tentative agreement. 1. Move members would submit to arrest on the pending riot and weapons charges. Witnesses would be allowed to observe to ensure there would be no violence. Arrests would be timed so some adults remained to care for the children and animals. Both sides agreed. 2. Those arrested would be released without posting bail. Move wanted this in writing. The city would only promise it verbally. 3. Move would permit a weapons
Because they're not
search and
gonna do
health
that.
inspection of the house. Both sides agreed. 4. Move would vacate its headquarters. Move flatly rejected this. From
that's-
Move's perspective, none of this touched on the real issue. Without freedom for their currently imprisoned members, there would be no peace. Finally, Move broke off talks after an imprisoned member was reportedly beaten by officials. In response, on March 1st, 1978, after nearly a year of siege, Mayor Rizzo made it official. He ordered a starvation blockade. The blockade stretched across 4 to 6 city blocks. Residents of the area were forced to show identification to return to their homes. Police marksmen occupied windows across the street from the Move house. Hundreds of cops and firefighters were assigned to the area.
Yeah,
Mayor Rizzo
it gets
made a
fucked up,
promise.
guys. Like,
They
it
will
is
see
fucked
more
up already.
firepower
It gets worse.
than they've ever seen in their lives. But before he could make good on that threat, one man tried one last-ditch effort to negotiate. Civil rights activist Walt Palmer. Palmer saw what others missed. The balance of power leaned entirely toward the city. To even the scales, he
Yup.
created the citywide Coalition for Human Rights. Churches, businesses, and activists joined together. They marched, pressured officials, and reframed the standoff as more than a neighborhood dispute. It was a human rights crisis. Palmer brought in civil rights attorney Oscar Gaskins. Unlike earlier moderators, Gaskins held power of attorney from Move, giving him real authority, and he was willing to face the issue others avoided: Move's imprisoned members. City officials quietly admitted that the charges on the jailed members were questionable, but said they couldn't just release inmates as they felt it would set a bad precedent. Gaskins proposed a compromise: let them appeal. On appeal, the court could release them without bail. If they acquitted, they'd walk free. If not, most of their time was already served, and both sides agreed. Other compromises followed. The city put in writing that any Move member arrested under the deal would be released without bail. Move agreed to health and firearms inspections, to clean the property, and to vacate within 90 days. Gaskins would represent them in court, avoiding direct confrontations. At first, progress showed. The building passed health codes, and the only weapons found inside were inoperable. And on May 8th, the city released some of the imprisoned Move members: Jerry, Conrad, Robert, and Sue Africa. Then came the biggest issue. Move had to leave by August 1st. But so far, every property that was offered to them for relocation was unsuitable in their eyes.
they do not.
Meanwhile, the city solicitor told a newspaper that once Move vacated, the houses would be bulldozed. To Move, it confirmed what they had always believed: the city wasn't negotiating in good faith. As tensions rose, no one stepped in to manage the escalating misunderstandings and disputes. When August 1st came and Move hadn't relocated, a judge declared Move had broken the agreement. He authorized the police to forcibly evict the group and arrest its members. Move prepared for the confrontation. They barricaded themselves inside and refused to come out. And on August 8th, 1978, Frank Rizzo fulfilled his promise of devastation. At 4 a.m., Walt Palmer got a call from Louise James, John Africa's sister. She asked him to come help. By the time he reached Powelton Village, police had already surrounded the house. Police warned Move to come out with their hands up, or the bulldozer would take down the fence. Move refused. Moments later, the bulldozer smashed through. The 12 adults and 11 children retreated to the basement. It was then that Palmer arrived at the scene. The group was given 5 minutes to comply with police commands. When they refused, the police used a large crane to punch holes in the walls. Outside, people watched as Move's 48 dogs ran wild, bolting from the house and scattering through the streets. When Palmer entered the Move home, armed police filled the place but found no Move members. The 12 adults and 11 children were barricaded in the basement. Through a hole punched in the basement window, police blasted high-pressure hoses, flooding the basement with thousands of gallons of water. Palmer tried to negotiate. He urged Move to release the children or at least the women. They refused, and as soon as he backed away from the building, the shooting started. According to Palmer, the first shot came from behind him, from the police line. The exchange of fire lasted only minutes.
Can't believe it.
Left 11 people wounded. 12 were police and firefighters. One officer, James Ramp, a 52-year-old veteran, was fatally wounded. Palmer recalled the scene.
Old Sergeant Ramp was standing on Pearl Street by a pole on the side of the house. So somebody shot from behind over here. I hit the ground. The police start shooting. They shoot first. And then I see 4 guys, policemen with some Thompson machine guns, go up to the building and just empty their guns, threw them down on the ground, and pull out their hand pistols and start shooting. Just shooting at random, no control.
The cops were running around like a bunch of maniacs. You should see, they was just running here and there. They didn't know what the hell to do. They were so disorganized.
Didn't they say that Move had inoperable
When the
weapons?
shooting stopped, police returned to their water cannons.
So the police shot a
pumped
bunch
more
of
water
guns
into the
and
basement
injured 11
and threw
people?
in smoke bombs and tear gas. The water rose to the Move members' noses.
12
Staying
and
in there
11
any
them being
longer
themselves?
meant drowning. They had no choice but to surrender. One by one, Move members emerged. Police arrested them on the spot, pulling children from their arms. The last to come out was 28-year-old Delbert Africa, shirtless, with his arms raised to show he was surrendering. What followed became one of the most infamous displays of police brutality from this incident. Delbert was knocked to the ground, kicked, and beaten in front of news cameras.
At one point, these moments of violence. As a black man goes behind a police van, there is a flash of white above his head. The next scene captured by the camera is this. A man is on the ground. Police surround him. Our news camera is located in a third-floor apartment diagonally across the street from Move headquarters. The armored truck is the same one into which police had just dragged 2 of their injured brother officers. We don't know what sparked the violence here. Was the black man resisting arrest, or were some police officers' tempers spilling over as they dragged their wounded from the line of fire?
What a mystery.
3 officers were charged over the beating, but all of them walked away free. Police Commissioner Joseph O'Neill later tried to justify the attack by saying, Delbert Africa wasn't a man, he was a savage. Police pumped the water out of the basement, and fans cleared the smoke. Walt Palmer believed they were preparing to destroy evidence. He tried to get a temporary restraining order on the house, but 90 minutes after Move surrendered, a wrecking crane demolished the house. In the aftermath, in a nearby city, people gathered in protest. Police pushed the crowd back with force, though little of that made the news. What did was Mayor Rizzo's press conference.
I can only tell you that these are violent people, that I hope that this gives the public a lesson that you can't deal with
violent
group
people that weren't
revolutionaries,
bothering anyone.
that they have to be dealt with. And it's amazing that this group has been running loose
in any way.
now for a half a dozen, couple, 3-4 years that I know of, and they should have been in prison many, many months ago for their defiance of the rules of civilized people and of our country and our land and city.
In December 1979, 9 Move members went on trial for the death of Officer James Ramp, along with charges of aggravated assault and conspiracy. Move argued that Officer Ramp hadn't been killed by anyone inside their house, but by his fellow officers, either on purpose or by accident. They insisted the group had been framed, and with the Move house demolished immediately after the siege, any evidence that might have implicated police or Move was gone. Walt Palmer, who had been at the scene, supported their claim. Move did not kill Sergeant Ramp. Couldn't have, because they were in the building facing me. He was on the side of the building. The bullet couldn't have come out and gone around the corner. However, Palmer was never asked to testify. The police had their own narrative. They said the bullet came from a gun they claimed was found in the Move basement. The weapon carried no usable
After they
fingerprints.
searched it?
Even
Wait.
so, investigators testified that Phil Africa had purchased 4 of the guns recovered, and a ballistics expert allegedly linked one of them to Ramp's death. The prosecution was led by then District Attorney Ed Randall, who later became mayor and governor. The facts as we know them are absolutely clear. They opened fire in a situation where the police were using as much restraint as they could, trying to enforce that court order, and they shot and killed the officer. No question about it. Murderers.
I'm sure.
It should be noted that we were unable to find any evidence that Move members fired any shots at police during this incident. The 9...
Not to mention, there was a search of weapons within their home, and they literally stated that the weapons were inoperable. So hey, just racism upon racism here.
Accused members, Chuck, Delbert, Eddie, Janet, Janine, Merle, Michael, Phil, and Debbie Africa, insisted on being tried together. After 19 weeks of trial in 1980, Judge Edwin Momd sentenced all 9 to 30 to 100 years in prison. The judge explained his sentencing. If they're a family and have all acted jointly, and they should all share equally in the punishments imposed. But for the rest of Move, the fight was not over. It was only just beginning. The 9 members behind bars, now known as the Move 9, became their new cause. As for police, they had only shown a sliver of the horrors they were capable of unleashing. After the 1978 confrontation, Move scattered. Their house was gone, their community fractured, and their energy turned toward one goal: freeing the Move 9. To do that, they needed a new headquarters. In 1981, Frank Africa, Move's naturalist minister, moved into the home of his mother, Louise James, at 6221 Osage Avenue. Louise had lived in the row house quietly for 27 years. Then, in 1982, her brother, John Africa, joined them, and one by one, other Move members followed until Osage Avenue had become the organization's new headquarters. It was located in West Philadelphia, a block away from Cobbs Creek Park. It was a largely African-American, middle-class neighborhood. Move was determined, once again, to make their neighbors hear their plight and join the fight to free the Move 9. It was the same tactic they used in 1978, and back then, it worked, somewhat. The city had freed some of their members, but the situation was much more serious for the convicted 9, and the city wasn't going to budge. Meanwhile, like before, their beliefs that all life mattered resulted in animals, including vermin, gathering in the house and spilling into neighboring homes. One neighbor, Lucretia Wilson, said she had to turn on her stove before cooking just to drive the bugs away. Even then, some ended up in her food, which she threw away. Her children would also wake in the night crying from bug bites. Eventually, after her husband Lloyd was assaulted without provocation by a Move member, the Wilsons moved out. Neighbors soon began complaining of filth and health risks, not just for themselves, but for Move's own children. Neighbor Tyree Johnson said they wore only underwear or ragged clothes. They didn't go to school, and they were allowed to eat only raw food, garlic, onions, potatoes. Tyree recalled, "I saw the kids across the street there, going through a garbage bucket, getting something to eat. I was surprised that they would be eating out of a garbage can." Lucretia Wilson said neighbors tried to help.
Very well said, Royal. Yeah. I don't think I have any issue with the statement being made saying white people are insufferable. There are a lot of issues with a lot of people of my race. Yeah. There's a lot of issues because we are put in a sociological standing that makes us like better than others. And a lot of people that are white abuse that and think it gives them a superiority over others. So, I don't take it personally at all. It says something if you do, if I'm truly honest. I don't particularly do anything or try to do anything to be harmful to anybody of color. I'm nothing but supportive of their cause because all the things that I have studied show that they have nothing but years and years and decades of grief and torment put upon them, especially by white people. I mean, there are rare cases in which minorities target other minorities. That's really not the main problem nor the focal point. It's historically white people put down minorities and have in many a society, many a country. I mean, where does it end? It truly doesn't. I mean, white people got, realistically, like, there was a whole opioid crisis in Asia because of white people trading it to them. South Africa got basically occupied by white people because they didn't want black people to be in charge of it. Obviously, there's a lot of generalization, but I can't summarize a huge important historic events without generalizing it, unless you want me to go into hours of talking about it. There's a generalization to the statement that white people are insufferable. I think it's really silly to take offense to that when nothing stops you from just being like, clearly they're talking about the people who have lost their mind and consider themselves superior for no reason other than that's what they were given at birth, socially for no reason. White people showed up in America and brutally killed Native Americans just because they decided they wanted the land. Our entire country is built off of racism. We brutally killed Native Americans to take over the land and tricked them under the guise of diplomacy. And then we enslaved black people from a different continent. We tricked them, brought them to our country, and enslaved them for decades to work for us so we did not have to do the work. And the entirety of the police and their workforce and motivations is built on racism to keep it was made to keep slaves from running away from their plantations. So I find it questionable if you're upset at somebody saying white people are insufferable. I can't help but agree. We have a grueling history of centuries of causing problems to people that aren't white. Just because there's a bunch of us that think we have some sort of superiority over them due to skin color, which is nothing. Skin color means nothing. It is a 0.01 difference when ultimately humans are 99% DNA similar. It is extremely a nothing burger. And there are just people convinced that it is a big deal. Race is, who gives a fuck? I do not give a single shit. And I try to not. everybody is influenced by stereotypes and personal biases in some way. It is important to do your best to not let that sway your opinion on people different than you, because the differences are so slim. And it, in fact, ends up boiling down into culture and environment and how you were raised within it rather than skin. And so it's basically fucking nothing. It doesn't fucking matter. I really don't give a shit if people hate the majority of white people. We aren't exactly doing a good job of proving them wrong. Historically, we've done a pretty awful fucking job of proving them different. Just objectively, if I'm honest. And I'll do my damnedest to prove it different, but I can't fight centuries of torment and war crimes. I can't fix that, but I can at least make my perception and my support known. Being offended by any of that is a clear sign of something in your brain that has either been pushed into you or you truly believe that just doesn't fucking matter. You should be able to hug every single neighbor you got, no matter what they look like, because ultimately, like, you all have red. You all bleed red. And you should take care of each other if that happens. It's preposterous to think different. It's disgusting to think different. You are subhuman if you do not treat every single person equally. And while we can be influenced by our own problems and biases, mistakes happen, but deliberate disgust is subhuman. And you should touch some grass.
They replaced old garbage bins with new ones, leaving bread inside. But when the Move parents found out, they became angry. Cassandra Carter testified that even the children's voices came through the loudspeaker, echoing the same rhetoric as the adults. Sometimes they used to have the children on the bullhorn to say things just like they were, because they were being trained in the same tactics as the adults were. And they would put the kids out as visible points, and they'd stand behind them and say whatever they had to say, using a child as a shield. By 1983, Block Captain Clifford Bond was knocking on doors with a petition against Move. He took it to ward leaders, then to police. Bond described how Louise James's home had been transformed into a military bunker, but legally, the city's hands were tied. Louise James was allowing Move to stay. This changed in October 1983 when Move kicked her out of her own house. For years, Louise had been Move's communications director, even writing their column in the Philadelphia Tribune. Now, she was cast aside. According to a police report, John Africa ordered Frank to beat his mother until she vomited. Then Frank tried to smother her with a pillow as other Move members looked on. Frank allegedly asked if he should kill her. John Africa's answer, not this time. Some Move members blamed Louise, others quietly supported her, saying she had pushed back against the godlike grip of her obsessively controlling brother, John Africa. Louise had had enough and wanted her home back. She began cooperating with the city.
Yeah, I mean, there's a a whole list of issues that Move had within their movements, but I think ultimately wanting to be treated properly isn't exactly an incorrect desire. I think there's a lot of extremes within their beliefs and their thought process, but there's that amongst a lot of groups.
Offering the leverage officials needed to push for eviction, but she was firm on one point. She didn't want bloodshed. Unfortunately, the police would break this promise. Meanwhile, the political landscape was shifting.
Shocking.
Mayor Rizzo was succeeded by William Joseph Green, and then, in 1984, Philadelphia elected its first African-American mayor, Wilson Goode. Goode knew Move. As managing director from 1980 to 1983, he had met with both the group and their neighbors. He later admitted he sympathized with residents, but as mayor, said he lacked the authority to simply evict Move. Yet the Philadelphia Special Investigation Commission, which would later investigate the catastrophe to come, would find otherwise. In the summer of 1984, Good was actually told the legal grounds already existed to act against certain MOVE members. However, he held back.
Not true.
Father Paul Washington, one of the mediators.
Yeah, the one of the bigger frustrating points of this whole thing is a ton of the evidence brought up against MOVE, especially what was used as permission to basically act upon them is basically all made up. There's a lot of shit that happened in this that is just nothing. There was no proof. They just were like, well, that solves that tears it. We're gonna, I mean, like literally once again, like the shooting into the previous home and then killing an officer and then blaming them even though they were on the opposite side of the house, and basically it implies that he was shot in the back by a police officer unable to control himself in some regard, and then they burn the house, break the house down, etc., in order to conceal any evidence that it was different. Police know what they're doing, man. That's the problem. And it's always been a problem. The police continuously know how to get away with it. And it's an issue. That's why there needs to be more regulation and more responsibility and punishment for not doing it. And that's a big, big factor in the defunding of police, etc. For some reason, people think defunding the police means getting rid of every single dollar they have. That's just not how it works. It's more of distributing the funds to more important things like training, basic human negotiation and communication, and probably not multiple firearms and military grade vehicles for no reason other than brutally murdering probably minorities based off of their history. So,
during their previous standoff, recalled seeing Mayor Good at church in April 1985. Good told him plainly, "I'm going to have to move very carefully and cautiously because we want to avoid making any of the mistakes that were made back there in 1978. But for Osage Avenue, the breaking point came soon after. MOVE constructed a fortified bunker on the roof, heavy timber with openings that looked like gun ports. On April 30th, 1985, desperate neighbors held a high-profile press conference that the city would not be able to ignore. "We are here to let the governor know about the disquietude and general state of terror we are forced to live under by the MOVE organization. We want the governor to know that regardless of whatever may have happened in the past, today MOVE is a clear and present danger to the health and safety of our entire block. We also want the governor to know that we have been to our elected representatives in city and state government, but to date, nothing of any consequence has been done." Finally, Mayor Good acted. He requested a tactical plan to remove the occupants of the house. District Attorney Ed Rendell reactivated arrest warrants for 4 adults inside. Police secured a court order to take the children, who had been kept out of school. But the scars of 1978 still hung over the city. Mediation had failed then, leaving police, MOVE, and the neighborhood locked in cycles of distrust and anger that escalated to the point of extreme violence. Now, in 1985, those same forces were colliding again. Only this time, the outcome would be far, far worse. On May 12, 1985, Mother's Day, police cleared Osage Avenue. Houses up and down the block were evacuated. By dawn, as many as 500 officers had taken up positions, some inside neighboring homes with clear views of the MOVE headquarters at 6221 Osage. A tactical team guarded the rear alley, which MOVE had barricaded. 2 more units prepared to cut through the adjoining row house and lay siege from the sides. Those 500 officers carried arrest warrants for only 4 MOVE members. The charges? Parole violations, contempt of court, illegal possession of firearms, and terrorist threats. At 5:30 a.m. on May 13th, Police Commissioner Gregor Samber raised a megaphone. "Attention MOVE! This is America. You have to abide by the laws of the United States." He read the warrants aloud, then added, "We do not wish to harm anyone. All occupants have 15 minutes to peacefully evacuate the premises and surrender. This is your only notice. The 15 minutes starts now." No one came out. Instead, Move taunted the police. Sandberg gave the order to attack. High-pressure fire hoses opened up on the house. Then, police blew holes in the walls with explosives and flooded the building with tear gas. Then came the gunfire. Police insertion teams pushed to enter the house, and Move fired back from inside. What followed was a sustained firefight. The police unleashed M16 rifles, Uzis, shotguns, 30-06 and 22 250 sniper rifles, a Browning automatic, even a Thompson submachine gun. In the words of the Philadelphia Special Investigation Commission, officers fired over 10,000 rounds of ammunition in under 90 minutes at a row house containing children. Inside the Move home, there were just 13 people, 4
10,000 rounds in 90 minutes. Anybody want to do that math? I will. With kids inside. For 13 people. Over 100 bullets a minute. By the way. Just, yeah. It's an unfathomable amount of gunfire. Even within a minute, let alone 90.
4 men, 3 women, and 6 children. And the city knew it. The mayor, the managing director, and the police commissioner had been told the night before, on May 12th,
against women and children
were inside. The siege continued.
So
police
cool.
kept water cannons on the house all day, pumping roughly
It gets
640,000 gallons inside. Officer Michael Tercy later explained their strategy in the 1985 Move Commission testimony.
What we intended to do was to create a diversion on the roof of the Move compound. That diversion was to pour a large amount of water onto the bunker itself.
Yeah, I mean, look at the title of the video.
Obscure the vision of anyone that may be inside the bunker and prevent them from seeing the insertion teams as they made their way down Osage Avenue.
Police tried another tactic to force them out. This time, the bomb squad tunneled underground, aiming to punch a hole into the basement. The plan was to simultaneously pump tear gas into the basement as well as the second floor, leaving the first floor as an escape route for Move members. But when they had attempted to breach the house, officers discovered Move had reinforced it. Walls inside walls, one officer recalled. The gas still seeped in. Birdie Africa, just 13, remembered.
The tear gas started coming in. We got the blankets and they was wet, and we had them in the bucket and they was wet until we put them over our heads and started laying down.
At the barricade, WDAS radio news director Barbara Grant heard her name shouted. Ramona Africa was asking for a meeting with Jerry Africa, civil rights activist Walt Palmer, Barbara herself, and Harvey Clark of Channel 10. Barbara saw it as a chance to stop the siege. She rushed to officers with the request, but they shoved her aside. She tried City Hall, but no one would intervene. By that afternoon, neighborhood leaders were trying too.
Shocking.
Stanley Vaughn urged Move to negotiate with the neighbors. He begged them to at least send the children out to ease the tension, but there was no reply. On Osage Avenue, Jerry Africa, a ranking member who didn't live in the house, was joined by civil rights activist Marcel Randolph and retired judge Robert Bobby Williams. They tried to reach Mayor Wilson Goode directly, promising Move would surrender if the city simply agreed to discuss the convictions of the Move 9. The Chief Justice of Pennsylvania's Supreme Court also tried calling. Goode never picked up. He later claimed he never got their calls. Instead, he stayed in his home office, just 30 blocks away, watching the siege unfold on television, deferring everything to his on-scene commanders. Police believed Move was heavily armed.
Which is
Officers
insane,
said
by
they
the
feared
way.
Move would open fire from the fortified
They were not heavily armed.
rooftop bunker if they tried to storm the house, so the police would make a decision that would haunt the city forever. At 5:20 p.m., a Pennsylvania State Police helicopter lifted off from the command post. It circled Osage, then hovered 60 feet above the Move house. Inside the aircraft, Lieutenant Frank Powell held a canvas bag containing an improvised explosive. The device consisted of 2 sticks of Tovex, a commercial explosive meant for blasting trenches through rock, and a 1 1/4 pound block of C4 placed on top. The interesting thing about that, though, is local police weren't supposed to have C4. The Army had banned its distribution years earlier. However, a letter to the police department
Just
from
a
an
casual
FBI agent
IED
later
by the
surfaced,
local
showing
police.
that roughly 30 of these C4 blocks had been given to Philadelphia police by the FBI without the city ever requesting them, specifically for the anticipated conflict with MOVE. Commissioner Samber later defended it. The use of the device itself gives me the least pause.
Yeah.
It was selected as a conservative and safe approach to what I perceived as a tactical necessity. I was assured that the device would not harm the occupants. Unfortunately, not only would it do more than just harm the people inside that house, it would destroy an entire neighborhood. After radioing firefighters on the ground, Lieutenant Powell lit the fuse. With Mayor Good's approval and Police Commissioner Gregor Samber's insistence, at exactly 5:28 p.m.
You know, the safest thing in any conflict, a bomb.
Powell dropped the bomb straight onto MOVE's rooftop bunker.
Yeah, notorious for being a very safe measure. Exactly, I agree.
Following the explosion, fire erupted almost instantly as burning metal fragments pierced a gas can on the roof, igniting gasoline vapors into flame. Ramona Africa remembered what it was like in the basement when the bomb dropped.
The house shake. We knew something had happened. It never, ever occurred to me that they had dropped a bomb on us. You know, we felt something.
I think it might be from it. I don't know if this interview's from it. There's a really good documentary on the Move 9 that came out like during the pandemic. I can't remember exactly what year or where it's at, but there's a really good documentary on this.
But I didn't know what it was. But, you know, in not too long a period of time, it started getting hot and filling with more and more smoke. And we realized, we started hearing crackling of the fire, and the smoke was getting thicker and thicker. And we realized then that the house was on fire.
Through the day, fire trucks had been blasting MOVE with water. But now, when it mattered most, they stood down. No hoses turned on the blaze, even as it spread to neighboring homes. Police Commissioner Samber had asked fire officials to let it burn, claiming he wanted the flames to take out the rooftop bunker. He turned fire into a tactical weapon, a decision the Philadelphia Special Investigation Commission would later call unconscionable. Meanwhile, the 13 MOVE members were trapped inside the house, desperate to escape.
Almost like that's
the
fucking
instant that
twisted.
we could be seen trying to come out, the cops immediately start shooting at us, said Ramona Africa. You could hear the bullets hitting all around us, forcing us back into the burning building. This happened a number of times, at least twice. Started getting so bad in there with the fire spreading quickly, you know, and the smoke, that you're faced with a situation where, you know, you're either going to be burned alive or possibly shot to death. Police strongly deny shooting at fleeing MOVE members. Reporter Pete Kane, who was hidden across the street from the MOVE house, says he heard police gunfire aimed at the MOVE home as fire blazed. Pete heard police shout, "They're coming out the back," and minutes later, he heard gunshots. Police Commissioner Samber said earlier that police were looking for 3 armed men who might be in alleys or tunnels dug from under the house. During the fire, police reported gunshots from houses behind the one under siege. Officer James Bergeyer later said the fire was so intense that glass windows burst on their own. At first, the pops sounded like gunfire, adding to the confusion. In the chaos, perhaps no one could tell the difference. By 7:30 p.m., Ramona Africa and 13-year-old Bertie Africa tried to escape again. Ramona remembered the adults calling out that they were coming out, bringing the children with them. By then, the row house was an inferno, temperature climbing past 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,000 degrees Celsius. Bertie testified that the children wanted out, but police kept firing at the back of the house. 3 officers later testified that they saw a man carrying a gun. Bertie says it wasn't a gun at all. It was 9-year-old Tommaso Africa being carried out.
He opened the thing and had Tommaso was taking him out, and then they started shooting again, and then they brought him back in.
Officer Bergeyer was haunted by what he saw next. He said he watched Ramona and Bertie emerge from the smoke. He wanted to help, but his fellow officers stopped him by saying it was a trap. So the officer made a hand movement to tell Bertie to come to him.
So I ran out and I scooped him underneath his left arm. And I'll never forget it. The first thing he said to me is, "Don't shoot me, don't shoot me."
Bergeier carried him out. Ramona was arrested on the spot. Even with severe burns on her arms, police put handcuffs on her.
In the hospital, I was looking for the rest of my family to come in, and nobody came in behind me. And that's when I knew some of my family, at least, were dead.
She and 13-year-old Birdie Africa were the only ones who made it out alive. The adults who lost their lives were MOVE founder John Africa, Teresa Brooks Africa, Frank James Africa, Raymond Foster Africa, James Conrad Hampton Africa, and Rhonda Ward Africa. The children were Tommaso Lavino Africa, Delisha Orr Africa, Zanita Dotson Africa, Phil Phillips Africa, and Katricia Dotson Africa. But the fire didn't just consume the MOVE house and 11 of the men, women, and children inside. It destroyed 60 other homes in the neighborhood, leaving more than 250 Philadelphians homeless. Neighbors stood helpless, watching their block vanish in flames.
Conservative and safe measure,
Janice
by the way.
Walker, one of those evacuated the day before, had lived on Osage Avenue for over 3 years of tension. "My family and all their dreams, all their aspirations are tied up in that house," she said. "We were hoping there would be a peaceful settlement, and that they would move out, and that we would be able to live like normal human beings. We've had enough of this." Others echoed the grief. Alvarita Spain put it plainly. "When you work hard for what you have, I mean actually work hard, to get what you have, you don't want to see it, lost like this." As the blaze spread, frustration spilled over. Some neighbors begged the police to act. Others blamed Mayor Good and city officials. In the following days, displaced residents were scattered, some to relatives, others to a Red Cross shelter at St. Carthage Roman Catholic Church, 3 blocks away. Milton Williams, left homeless, tried to hold on to resolve. "We've got to stick together. We'll have homes again. The city and the state did this, and they have to replace our homes."
They do
2
not.
doors down, Thomas Mapp mourned what was gone. "I was in the house 22 years, and all I got left is the clothes I got on. I haven't seen the house yet. I'm afraid to look." The smoke eventually cleared, but the damage could never be undone. The MOVE bombing wasn't just a failure of
replace the
conflict
houses?
resolution, planning, and logical thinking.
I don't think so.
It was a collapse of trust between a city's administration and its people. Decisions made in anger, pride, and a general lack of humanity turned an eviction into a tragedy. And for decades to come, Philadelphia would struggle to answer the same question. How did it come to this? However, the tragedy didn't end when the fire was put out. What followed was more chaos, bitter investigations, disturbing revelations, and the remains of moved children, and a rebuilding effort on Osage Avenue that quickly turned into another scandal of its own. The city council refused to investigate the incident. District Attorney Ed Rendell declined to convene a grand jury, and the local Fraternal Order of Police dismissed the deaths as a suicide. But Mayor Wilson Good wanted to know what went wrong. 1 week after the bombing, he appointed an independent commission to investigate. Public hearings began that October inside Wider Horizons for You and Yours, or WHYY's auditorium. 92 witnesses testified over 5 weeks, all broadcast live for the city to see. In the second week of the hearings, the police commissioner, Gregor Samber, was called to testify. He defended the operation, saying MOVE's refusal to surrender forced his hand. It remains a fact that if MOVE members had simply come out of the building, they would be alive today. Property damage would have been minimal, and we would not now be gathered. But they announced that morning that they would never surrender, and that they would kill as many of us as they could. But as more officials were called to testify, inconsistencies began to show. Managing Director Leo Brooks insisted he had no idea gasoline was stored on the roof. Yet Fire Commissioner William Richmond admitted he knew an amount of combustibles was up there before the bomb was dropped. In March 1986, the commission released its findings. Chairman William Brown III was blunt. He described an inept team of city officials who, in his view, frankly did not seem to know what they were doing. The firepower used was, he said, excessive and unconscionable. To destroy a middle-class neighborhood while trying to arrest just 4 people made no sense at all. Brown also acknowledged race was part of the conflict. The fact that you would make a determination to allow that fire to burn and to use the fire as a tactical weapon would not have happened in a comparable white neighborhood. Yet, in his view, it wasn't overt racism, but a chilling lack of basic humanity. The people who had to make the decision just didn't take into consideration and were not sensitive enough to the fact that these indeed were human beings in that house when they made the judgment to unleash the amount of firepower and explosive power against that home. The report went further. It revealed the workings of the police in the days leading up to and on May 13th. The mayor had ordered police to create a tactical plan, but left oversight to Managing Director Brooks, who in turn abdicated responsibility to Police Commissioner Samber.
My
Samber
God.
relied not on his command staff, but on a bomb disposal officer, a pistol range sergeant, and a patrolman. Men with no training for the job. The result was a hastily assembled plan, never committed to writing, and approved without serious review. Directives to remove the children were muddied and never enforced. The mayor, the managing director, and the police commissioner all knew children were inside the house the night before, yet pressed ahead anyway. The commission's report revealed even more. The bomb disposal unit tasked with the assault wasn't trained for the job, yet they were handed authority over life and death decisions. Firefighters later confirmed that the blaze could have been contained early without putting their lives at risk.
What?
The report concluded that police gunfire had even blocked some MOVE members from escaping the burning building.
No.
The children's deaths, it said, appeared to be unjustified homicides worthy of a grand jury investigation. Even though the commission had called for a grand jury investigation, no one was ever prosecuted. And in 1987, Wilson Good was re-elected. Meanwhile, Ramona Africa faced a separate trial of her own. Representing herself, she was convicted on riot charges and spent 7 years in prison. In 1996, she and relatives of 2 MOVE members killed in the bombing sued the city. Before the trial, a federal judge granted former Mayor Wilson Good immunity in civil court. But that protection did not extend to former Police Commissioner Gregor Samber or Fire Commissioner William Richmond. A jury found Samber and Richmond liable for the fire, ordering them and the city to pay $1.5 million to Ramona and the families of the 2 victims. On top of that, Ramona was awarded $400,000 for pain and suffering, and another $100,000 for disfigurement caused by the fire. She called the verdict justice, proof, at least, that the government was being held accountable. But not everyone agreed. Civil litigation expert Larry Charfus argued the jury treated the case like a personal injury suit rather than the outrage it truly was. An outrage, he said, would have been at least $5 million. The damages were technically split, but in reality, the city paid for it all. Samper and Richmond were ordered to contribute just $1 a week for 11 years, more symbolic than serious. And as soon as that summer, a federal judge wiped away even that token punishment, ruling the 2 had immunity as city employees carrying out their duties. In 1998, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the city's liability, but rejected Ramona's efforts to reinstate the judgment against Samper and Richmond. Yet the fact remains, no one was arrested or criminally charged for the bombing. Years later, Ramona summed up the bitter irony.
5 children and 6 adults. Nobody was ever arrested for the murder of my family. Nobody went to jail but me. I was arrested. I was the only one put on trial for arson, conspiracy, everything that they did. They charged me with.
After her release, Ramona remained MOVE spokesperson, campaigning for the freedom of the MOVE 9. Birdie Africa, renamed Michael Ward, was placed in his father's custody. He reportedly spent years in therapy, struggling with his memories of MOVE and the bombing. In 2013, tragedy struck again when he drowned in a hot tub while on a cruise. While the city officials shifted blame on each other and Ramona fought for justice, the residents of Osage Avenue wondered who was going to help them. First, the city promised the residents they'd be back in their homes by Christmas 1985, in brand new houses with modern amenities. But Christmas came and went, with only 5 houses finished, and even those were already falling into dispute. What began as a $4.9 million rebuild spiraled into an $8.2 million debacle. By the summer of 1986, most of the block was technically rebuilt, except for 6221 Osage, which police kept under guard for years to keep MOVE out. But as residents moved back in by that fall, they had problems. Roofs leaked, ceilings caved, beams sagged, and walls cracked. Some houses had no structural support at all. The first contractor was eventually jailed for stealing $130,000 in construction funds. Families who had lost everything now found themselves living in houses already falling apart. By 1997, the Army Corps of Engineers confirmed what residents had long been saying. The houses were unsafe. Renovating would cost more than rebuilding, and by 2005, the estimate would be $13 million. Mayor John Street cut his losses, offering $150,000 buyouts. 36 families took the deal. The rest sued and briefly won a multi-million-dollar settlement, only to see it reduced on appeal to the same $150,000 the city had offered years before. Decades later, in 2016, the city finally brought in private developers to rehabilitate the homes. Residents returned, but as longtime Pine Street neighbor Tyree Johnson reflected, the neighborhood has changed completely.
Casual 3
and while
decades
Osage
later.
Avenue crumbled, the grief extended far beyond the neighborhood. For the Move mothers still behind bars, the news of May 13th reached them in the cruelest way possible. Jeanette, Janine, and Sue Africa said it took less than a minute for a prison guard to tell them they just had a firebombing at your house and your children are dead. In solitary confinement, there were no phone calls, no visits, no news reports. 6 months later, the medical examiner's office finally acknowledged the deaths of their children in a simple letter. Decades passed, and then, in 2021, the truth surfaced in the most shocking way possible. During a Princeton University online course, Real Bones, Adventures in Forensic Anthropology, curator Janet Mung casually used Move as a case study in forensic anthropology, and in the process, revealed that the remains of Move victims had not been buried like officials had said in 1986. The bones of 2 children, Katricia Tree Africa and Delisha Africa, had been held for years at the Penn Museum and later at Princeton, without the knowledge or consent of their families. Further missteps were uncovered. Unauthorized police sharpshooters allowed back onto the crime scene, a crane tearing through rubble while bodies were still buried beneath it, destroying evidence and scattering human and animal remains together. At the lab, bodies were improperly refrigerated, accelerating decomposition, and key ballistic tests were never done. These failures, which Move has referred to as a murder cover-up, left the most controversial question unanswered. Were Move members killed by fire and smoke, or by police bullets? Because the Move children had no dental or medical records, identifying their remains was nearly impossible. When it came to return them to their families, the process became confused and riddled with mistakes. Penn Museum called the use of Delisha and Tree Africa's remains a serious error in judgment, but Move saw it differently. To them, this wasn't a mistake. It was theft, sanctioned by the very systems that had already killed their family. Pam Africa put it plainly: body snatchers and grave robbers. Unfortunately for Move, once again, there was no justice. The group itself never disappeared from Philadelphia. Since the bombing, Move has persisted in various forms, but so has the criticism. Back in the 1980s, outsiders had accused the group of mistreating children, pointing to harsh living conditions and rigid rules. Years later, Michael Ward, the boy once known as Birdie Africa, would give his own account of what it was like growing up inside. He described how children were forced to fight one another, supposedly to toughen them into self-sufficiency. He admitted he feared John Africa, who once punished him by cutting him off from his mother. And he recalled an especially disturbing incident. After he and other children secretly cut their hair in protest of the rules, they were hoping to run away, but lost their nerve. When the adults discovered them, Frank Africa lashed out, yelling, then striking Birdie across the face. In 2021, the disturbing truths continued to come out when a blog, Leaving Move, and later the podcast, Murder at Ryan's Run, revealed even more troubling allegations. Former members claimed that as children, they were forced to pair or get married with one another, some having children when they were as young as 13. Pairings, they said, were arranged by the adults, regardless of their wishes. When these survivors, now grown, began voicing their anger, Move's senior leadership offered no response. Today, Move exists in fractured form. Mike Africa Jr., who was once one of these mistreated Move children, leads a faction he describes as an evolution of Move, a gentler revival that, he says, keeps faith with the original teachings of John Africa while rejecting old abusive practices. His goal, like Move's original mission, is to spread awareness about the failures of the system and to inspire people to resist it. As for the Move 9, Merle and Phil Africa died in prison, while Delbert and Chuck Africa were paroled after more than 40 years, only to die shortly after release. The others spent a few more years in prison before they, too, were finally freed. In 2020, the Philadelphia City Council issued a formal apology for the bombing. As for Mayor Wilson Goode, he has said no matter what else he does in life, he will forever be remembered for tragedy. What began in the 1970s as a protest against violence and a hope for a different way of living became entangled in more bloodshed and destruction than anyone could have imagined. Neighbors wanted peace and safety in their community.
Blood follows you, bro.
Meanwhile, Move clumsily and aggressively pushed forward for justice, and city officials sought to end the conflict but due to incompetence, a lack of humanity, and a general, if it doesn't work at first, force it mentality, all they did was bring devastation and more injustice. If you'd like to hear more testimonies from those who lived through the Osage Avenue bombing, check out the Philadelphia Inquirer's audio series, Move, Untangling the Tragedy. The link will be in the description. And if you would like to show your appreciation to the people whose hard work made this documentary possible, the best thing you can do is tell the YouTube algorithm it's worth suggesting to people. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, share this video with someone you think will find it interesting, and check out another one of our videos like this one about the cryptic notes left at a murder scene and how the internet is racing to decipher them to catch a killer at large.
Great video. I mean, just a great video about the system. What is there to say? I mean, just a great synopsis over the case of the Move 9. But like, it's a perfect example of how the system is abused and perpetuated to be abused by the people a part of it. Don't know what to say. It's a difficult one. Obviously there's some issues with Move's practices back then, but their desire for human rights and dissent of how it's violated by the police especially is truthful and correct. So just a unfathomable amount of ways that it could have gone different and better. But obviously that wasn't the goal of the police. The goal was brutalization and murder due to just disgusting amounts of racism, ultimately. I mean, what else is there to say?